mi gente, MsMalcolmHughes back with a book review, and today we are going to be talking about Between the World and Me by Mr. Ta-Nehisi Coates. Between the World and Me is a book written by Ta-Nehisi Coates that is actually a letter to his son. And it delves into the struggles that he's faced as a black man growing up in America, what it all means, and advice to his son, and essentially a love letter and guidance to his son, and tools to equip him with in order to move forward in not only America but in the world, and what it all means to him. And this book is actually modeled after The Fire Next Time by the one and the only Mr. James Baldwin. So Ta-Nehisi Coates actually wanted to make a modern day version of this book. And this book was actually a letter that James Baldwin wrote to his nephew, really discussing race in America, what it all means, how it has impacted him, how it will impact his nephew, the actual problem, and then advice for moving forward. So with this understanding, you get a really good knowledge of what Coates wanted to do. The question is, did Coates do a good job of doing it? Now, before we get into it, let me say I love me some Ta-Nehisi Coates. His writing is just superb. He's a brilliant writer. I love to read his works. And this was actually not my first time reading this book. This is actually my second time. I read this book when it first came out in 2015. I'm actually really lucky. This is actually an autographed copy of that book. Now, I've written all through this book. In retrospect, I don't know if that was the best decision, but I plan on keeping it forever. So hopefully my kids and grandkids one day will appreciate that. Now, this book takes us on Ta-Nehisi Coates' journey, his first understanding of race, his place in the world, or his intended place in the world, and just what it has been for him as a black man navigating that from his young preteen years to today. It starts us off in Baltimore. We follow him that entire journey and what it means to be black and masculinity in his Baltimore neighborhood and grappling with that. And a big thing that we see throughout this book is really Ta-Nehisi Coates' focus on the body, the human body, and someone taking your body from you. That's something he learned at a young age, just from being in his neighborhood, the guys who were tough, the guys who weren't, what that meant, and how at any given moment, someone who desired could take your body. He demonstrates that by saying that everyone was afraid, right? That hyper masculinity comes from a place of deep fear of knowing you have no control and wanting to exert that over others because you knew in the larger scheme of things you actually have no power. And I will tell y'all, the first time I read this book, it was really hard for me, not because it's not good, not because it's not brilliant, but because it's so poignant, in that he talks about things in such a way that even though I didn't grow up as a black male in America, I grew up as a black girl in America, right, and coming into womanhood, and our experiences were so similar, just the feelings and the understanding of how you need to navigate throughout the hood. And I love that he acknowledges here as well that men and women have different challenges and we may not fully understand them. I didn't necessarily have to be tough, right? I grew up as a woman in the hood and I had big brothers and big cousins who were who they were in our neighborhood. So like, I was protected in that sense. But whenever you're navigating the world as a woman in general, then as a black woman, there are just precautions that you have to take, right? And men will never know that, and we may not necessarily know their struggle, but we all have things that we have to navigate and push through. And just the way in which he wrote about it was very emotional for me. It was very like emotionally charging. So there were moments when I would be reading this in public where I would have to put it down to stop from crying and take a break, because he's so on the head, just touched on so many things that I felt. So we go from Baltimore, that understanding, to him and his father and the home in which he was raised and grandmother, and how everyone was trying to instill knowledge in him, right? That inquiry, right? That desire to answer questions, ask questions, seek the answers. And he took that with him to college, and he actually attended Howard University in Washington, D.C., the real HU. I'm kidding, I didn't go to Howard or Hampton, so I have no dog in that fight. But he went to Howard University. And there he calls it the Mecca. And I love that. For those of you who are even familiar with Islam in the slightest bit, you know that the Mecca is the holy place where you go, and every Muslim is required to go there at least once in their lifetime. And that is the essence. And for him, Howard was the Mecca. It was that safe place. It was that holy place of blackness. It was all converged there, and blackness across the diaspora, right? Not just Black American, but you had Caribbean blacks, you had blacks from Africa, you had blacks from Europe, you had blacks from Asia, you had black people from all over who were in this one place. It was this melting pot of blackness, right? And it was beautiful for him. It was safe, and it was really where he got to ask questions, but it was also where his professors really pushed him. And I love that again as well, just because my undergrad, Chicago State in Chicago, and that is, I will tell anyone, the HBCU of Chicago. It's not a historically black college or university, but it is a predominantly black college or university. And having that experience and then going to Penn afterwards, University of Pennsylvania, and just being so grateful that the foundation which I had was my alma mater, and just, it was a place where you just got to explore all of who you were, and your professors were brilliant, and you really got to soak in their knowledge, but they also challenged you, right? And he, like I, was a young Malcolmite, and what that means is just someone who was really read and was invested and believed in the teachings and principles of Malcolm X. And professors would challenge you on that, right? Just, what does that mean? And if that's the case, then is this not true? And it was just really a great place of exploration. And for him, even though he didn't finish, the library, again, like for me, was just that, the place where you could go and explore, and all these books. This is how I have a booktube. All my life I've loved books. So here we learned that, like, with that, his understanding of blackness evolved, and the individuals that he met, and he realized that blackness wasn't a monolith, right? So in that, he was safe because he got to explore that. But outside of the Mecca, right, there's still the real world. So what do you do with that? And how do you use your knowledge to help your people? And I really feel like that's one thing I love about Coates so much. He said it once, so it was written in one of his books, and he said that he charged his sword, and then he pointed that sword toward his people, and his sword is his pen. And I love that, and it's just so true. One thing in his writing that always is so clear for me is his love and passion about Black people and Black culture. And he really writes from a place of wanting not necessarily others to understand us, but wanting us to understand ourselves and understand the situation in which we've been placed in this caste system that has been designed. And I just love that about him and his work. And from there, he talks about all the different type of Black people, again, that he met at Howard, and just how it wasn't a monolith when it comes to what does it mean to be Black, what is it, right? Whether that's sexuality, whether that's intellect, whether that's culture, all of that. And he meets some dude that he thinks is just really dope, Prince Jones. And I love the way he writes this, because it wasn't even someone who he was like super close with. It was just someone you see around, y'all would dap it up, y'all would chat, right? It's someone you loved to run into at a party, right? And you would just say, that's a good dude, right? It's a good brother. Or you'd be like, yo, I really rock with her, like, it's a good sis, like that. And you may not even know them intimately the way you know some other folks, but it's just someone you love seeing around, and good energy and good people. And a lot of this book and his rage, and it is still rage, you can feel very much that he still carries this rage. And even when you're reading it, you're like, that is heavy to carry. But I understand why he's still like upset about it when writing this book. Like, some people think that there's nothing that's unforgivable. I'm not actually someone who believes that. So for me, I get his anger and I get his rage, but even when reading it, I could acknowledge that that feels like a heavy burden to carry, because his friend Prince Jones was actually murdered by a police officer. And to kind of pour salt in the wound, it was a Black police officer. So unpacking all of that and dealing with all of that, right? And understanding that, again, his body is not safe, right? Like, that's a lesson he had to learn again and again, and that's something that's really emphasized here, the body being not safe. But even with that, there are two big things that are unpacked. One, he understands that even though he was killed by a Black officer, there's more than that that's at play here, right? And that's why I told someone I used to date someone who was a cop, and they felt very on the defense about that. And my stance was, I'm never mad at an individual person choosing any profession to take care of themselves and their family, right? My issue is always with the larger institutions and policies that are at play. And this is what he makes clear that he clearly understands. And it's hard because the way in which he writes about race is a way in which you're gonna get woken up. You were asleep, you thought it was sweet. It's not. Like, that's how he writes. It's such a way of like, it's going to shake you, it's going to wake you up. And that's so funny because when he refers to people who view themselves as white and hold on to the concept of whiteness here, he calls them dreamers. And as someone who loves the word dream, I actually think it's too kind of a word. However, I get exactly what he means, because people who are so invested in the American dream or this dream of superiority that they can't let it go. So it's appropriate. And here he talks about those dreamers and how that dream is destroying all of us. And how that dream led to so many other things, right? How these ghettos that are created are a direct result of that dream, right? Of how folks who are so hyper vigilant, black people who are so hyper vigilant of ensuring that black people walk within whatever lines and parameters that have been designed for them, right, is a direct result of that dream. And how that dream, if people who identify as white, people who within themselves, they cannot let go of the idea of being white because they cannot let go of the idea of being superior and what that means, right? If they do not correct themselves, if they do not identify the problem, if they do not realize that it's destructive, then it would destroy all of us. And it's not on people of color to fix it. It's not on black people to teach you and solve it for you. So I do like that that's how the book kind of ends, with that realization that all of this is a problem, but it's on you all to fix it. You have to realize it's a problem. You have to do something about it. But even in that, he really talks about, again, it's always felt his love for black people. And when teaching his son, he talks about them taking trips abroad and how the struggle doesn't end there. And how we have the struggle. And even though he knows a different life than Ta-Nehisi Coates, he grew up in a more privileged position. And he doesn't have to learn that same type of masculinity. But it's also, he still has challenges. He still has to strive. He still has to know the struggle that we all go through in order to fix it, and not for white people but for himself and for us, right? So I think all of that is beautiful. And I think the bigger message that he sends to his son is they made us a race, but we made ourselves into a people. So even though that this is what has been designed for us, there's still beauty here. And I think that's what he wants all of us to understand. There's beauty here, even in the struggle. His first book is actually titled The Beautiful Struggle. Even in that, as we persevere, just understanding who we are. And he's actually someone who's atheist, and I think that comes across here because there's certain things that he cannot believe in, right? And he actually wonders if it's a detriment sometimes, right? The fact that for Prince Jones's mother, the ability to still push through. And there was something so powerful when he, toward the end, he goes to meet her and he writes up some of what they discussed, and he asked her, did she regret him going to Howard? Because he was brilliant. She wanted him to go to Princeton, she wanted him to go to Yale, she wanted him to go to Penn, she wanted him to go to Stanford, she wanted him to go to Ivy, Harvard. She wanted him to go there because he was that caliber of student, because that's who she had reared him to be. So he asked her, do you regret him going to Howard? And she says, no, I regret him being dead. Or no, I regret him being killed. Y'all, that was just so much. And he talks about the loss of that, what we lose, right? The weight of it all. Because when we lose someone, you're not just losing that person, you're losing everyone who's invested into them and all of what that means. So protecting the body and protecting ourselves in this struggle. And another thing that he really discussed that I appreciate is that people who consider themselves white can never be the measuring stick. It just can't. Whiteness can never be the measuring stick for what we are trying to be as a people in the struggle and the road in which we're on. And I just think that it was really well done. It's a book that really makes you think. It really causes you to ponder on your life, what you have done, what you haven't done, the interactions that you have with others, the purpose for your being, right? It causes you to reflect on race. It causes you to reflect on self-identity. It causes you to reflect on what has been restraining you, because sometimes he discusses that sometimes his upbringing has limited his ability to have free interactions with others. And I felt that, right? Because when you grow up in like the hood and you always have to look over your shoulders or wonder what's next, sometimes it does limit your ability to just be, and you have to learn that and to trust people and all of that. So he really touches on the different facets of the experiences of blackness and what all of it means, and how the dreamers and the system that has been created is harmful on multiple levels, but we still have created something beautiful. And he gives that advice to his son. And if for nothing else, I think this book, beyond challenging you, is just brilliantly written. Whenever I read Coates, it's clear that he's someone with just a masterful pen who really has mastered the English language. That's always something that sticks with me. That's one thing I love about Baldwin. Not only is he brilliant, not only are his ideas going to push you and challenge you, he's going to write it in such a way that even if you don't agree with him, you have to like admire it and appreciate the mind that created this and the masterful level of writing that you are reading and that is before you. Negatives of this book, again, I don't like the repetition of the word dreamers. It bothered me, but I got it, the message that was being sent, so that was a small thing. Another aspect is that I didn't always agree with Coates. I didn't, especially about certain aspects just around really like religion. He wasn't arguing against it by any means, but just what it means to like have that type of faith. So that I don't think was a problem. We just don't fully agree on that, and I think that was perfectly fine. Hakeem Madhubuti has a poem where he talks about what we need in the world, the different type of people we need in the world, and we need all of it. We need atheists, we need Muslims, we need Christians, we need Buddhists, we need all of it for us to continue to be and have this beautiful world in which we have. So I'm always open to different perspectives. Overall, I would say if I had to give this book a grade on A to F, I was a little nervous reading it the second time around, because I was like, will I love it as much as the first time? And I absolutely did. It's A+. It's stellar. It's so well written. The ideas, it will push you. I think when you are trying to chase Baldwin, I was really nervous because I was like, you want to try to write The Fire next time? What? But he did it, and he pulled it off, and it's masterful, and it's so good, and it still is poignant, it still is brilliant. It's all the accolades are deserved. I'm so glad that he's able to honor his friend Prince Jones, and I hope that that helped to lift some of the weight that he's been carrying. But I get that rage, and I hope that somewhere he has peace, not with what happened, but he has peace within himself, and the fact that he's been able to really tell this story and bring attention to it, and for all of us to really think about the world in which we live, right? That space between the world and us, and what we take up and what we mean, and how we are here together, and how we are working either to improve it or not, improve ourselves or not, and the ripple effects that that has. So again, I love this book. I think it was brilliant. I think all of y'all should absolutely read it. So yeah, that's it for me. And as my shirt says, Black literature changed my life. So I'm glad that y'all are all here and experiencing it with me. Hopefully Black literature is changing your life. And if you know someone who doesn't read Black literature, introduce them, because we all need to be changed by it. It's just otherworldly. So good when it's done right. All right, y'all, that's it for me. I am MsMalcolmHughes, one who believes that books are sometimes better than people. And until next time, be safe and be kind to each other. Odabo. Also, for those of you inquiring, I do still have buttons, my MsMalcolmHughes pins, and the details on how to get those are below.